Well, today we're going to do something a little different in commemoration of the holiday, and I'm going to revisit my favorite podcast interview. We're going to first start off with Dr. Les Carter and its conversation I had with him about narcissistic people. Then we'll move to Lisa Sonni, who talks about the trouble of breaking a trauma bond, and cap it with Dr. Robin Stern with revisiting the difficulties of identifying and experiencing gaslighting in relationships. And I hope you stay safe this weekend and come back and join me next Monday for a regular show where we're going to have an interview with Eleni Salgado about covert abuse.
What do you think are the signs that someone can start to look at or point at and be like, I'm absolutely in a relationship with a narcissist. I see these things. And you've said a few, like lack of responsibility, that defensiveness, likely that anger. What other things might they look for?
Going back to their need to be in control. How many times have you thought, this person just continues to nitpick at me? That would be a sign. Or this person has a pretty loose temper. In other words, all I have to do is one false move and I'm going to catch it. That's a sign. It may be that they're just super stubborn. And it's like, if I have something to say to that narcissistic person, it's like, why would I listen to you? That's low empathy. That's part of narcissism. These individuals might be secret keepers. And it's like, I want to know as much as I can about you because that allows me to have an upper hand, but there's certain things you're not going to know about me. So that's a sign. Or it may be that they are real good about talking to other individuals about how wonderful they are, but you see behind the scenes that they struggle, and you realize, there's this lack of consistency that they have. It's your inner self and your outer self doesn't really match pitch, and the more of an insider you are with them, the more you're going to see there's a whole lot of that. And as they can argue easily, they're easily critical and negative. I mean, there's so many things that if you see one or two of those kind of things that I just mentioned occasionally, don't we all have some of our own blind spots or moments where we're not really on top of our game? But with narcissists, the more you see them, you realize, man, this is persistent. And probably one of the biggest things is they absolutely won't take responsibility for relationship problems. So, let's say that you and I have a conflict and a difficulty. And so I might say something like, hey, Tara, or hey, Kerry, there's something that's bothering me. In our healthiness, we would say something like, it doesn't surprise us that we differ. In our healthiness, we would say, well, let's just sit down and talk about it. What were you expecting, and what did you receive instead, and what would you like for me to know? And then I would sit down and listen to your concerns, and we would have a sense of mutual regard in the way that we would talk with each other. Narcissists, I mean, that kind of thinking just is completely lost on them. They see relationships as a competition. And guess who's the designated loser, by the way? And they're constantly wanting to one up. And it's like, no, if there's a problem here, it can't possibly be me. So something's going on with you, and we've got to fix that. And so that's where they come with their bossiness and criticism and all the rest that goes along with it. And it's frustrating. But one of the things you can think, what did I do here to warrant this? You have to remind yourself, this isn't about you. This is about their dysfunction, and they happen to be bringing it to you. You're a player on their stage with them, but this is about who they are. And it's so important to be able to make that distinction and develop the objectivity there that they're not going to bring to the equation.
Yeah, that really leads me in great to my next questions, because I see people get stuck there so profoundly. When somebody's in a relationship with this type of individual and the problematic person makes it about the partner, the problem we're having is because you bring up the problems. We wouldn't have a problem if you didn't bring the problems up. But then they end up struggling about, what do we do? Do we get more help? Do we stay? Do we go see our pastor? Do I just need to suffer this out? I mean, what do you recommend people do when they recognize, you know what, this is habitual. I'm seeing the signs that Dr. Carter just outlined. What do you think they should do? Because I know people say they're stuck, and then they do a lot of work trying to change the problematic person.
Yeah. Well, bingo, right there. What you said right there at the very end. I'm trying to change that problematic person. And my alternative to that would be, go find a brick wall and bang your head on it. You'll get the same results. Um, you know, sure enough. And by the way, one of the things that you'll hear people say is just if you have a narcissist in your life, go no contact. Well, wouldn't that be nice? But sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. And sometimes you can do it because you don't have, people hanging on with you and you can just move on down the road. And if that's possible, that's a great possibility. Other times, though, it's not quite that simplistic. And when you hear my videos or my writing and all, I tend not to put these one size fits all kind of solutions on individuals. But you want to remind yourself, again, I'm dealing with somebody who's not reflective. They don't want to take responsibility. And so I can talk with them perhaps about strategies that might be more helpful than what we've been doing here in our relationship so far. But by and large, if there's going to be any kind of healthiness, well, being healthy means you have to have a certain healthy interior. And narcissists don't have that. They've got that emptiness I mentioned, the shame-based, the fear-based, the false self, the entitlement, the selfishness, all that goes with it. So we go to the use of a word that's very popular and has been quite some time in the field of psychology, and that's the word boundaries. And a lot of times people think boundaries means just tell everybody no and that'll solve the problem. But boundaries is something much, much bigger than that. Boundaries begins with you defining within yourself who you want to be. And that's no small kind of a task that individuals are required to maintain. I would, when I was in my counseling practice, I would ask people, let me know tell me what kind of characteristics that you want to have dominate who you are and how you want to be known. And so typically people come up with 2 or 3. They'll say, well, I want to be patient and I want to be understanding and I want to be friendly. It's like, okay, let's come up with about 17 or 18 more. And let's just kind of come up with a real good, well-rounded notion of who you want to be. And sometimes that would be a homework assignment. And then the next question that I would want to then ask them to ponder is, in what circumstances are you least inclined to be what you just described to me? And, well, when that person is argumentative, there goes my patience out the window. Or when that person discounts me, there goes my sense of inner well-being and calmness. And before you know it, you begin realizing that we wind up in this codependent dance with the narcissist. And make no mistake, they're the ultimate codependents. They're feeding off of you, which is what codependency is all about, just playing off of one another as opposed to operating on your own initiative. And then the question becomes, well, can we be in a position here where I can go ahead and live and act upon the ingredients, the traits, the qualities that I want to be? And if that person joins me, that would be wonderful. And if they don't join me, I'm still going to stick with my initiatives anyway. And that's hard. Because it does require a certain moving off or moving away from them emotionally, even though physically you may have to still be in their presence. That's the stuff that therapy consists of, and then breaking that down into the theoretical parts, but then breaking it down into real life circumstances with individuals.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah. So how did you actually become focused on trauma bonds specifically?
My own personal experience with a narcissistically abusive relationship that really led me to dive into the awareness of why people stay. It was a real need of myself to figure out what kept me in that. I had always felt like I was too smart. You, of course, find out that education has absolutely nothing to do with it. Intelligence is not a factor. But it was this need for me to understand why I stayed that led me to want to understand why do people stay. And while not everyone who stays or struggles to leave is in a trauma bond, many people are, and it's not something that people know about. I actually remember conversations with my own abuser talking about, like, I feel like I have Stockholm syndrome. I just don't understand. He would just roll his eyes like, oh, okay, I'm your captor, and think it was this ridiculous thing. But as it turns out, there's such a similar dynamic to exactly that.
Yeah. So what were you feeling that you knew something's wrong, that this was not a normal connection in a relationship?
Well, in fairness, a lot of it felt normal, not good, but normal. even though I will unequivocally say it is not normal. But for me, what I was feeling at the time when I really felt like I could not leave was this feeling of being stuck. I would typically say to people, if you feel trapped, that's a huge part of it. I felt like I loved him and I hated him. He was the knife, he was the Band-Aid, he was the comfort, he was the pain. I couldn't leave. I would sometimes have panic attacks. I lost sleep. To say that it was overwhelming feels like not the right word, but it felt impossible. Leaving, no, that's not an option. I loved him too much. So you do feel like you love the person, and you also kind of often feel like you hate them. There can often be even this feeling of, it's more than just love and hate. It's you empathize with them so much from knowing what they've been through that you start to feel what they feel to a degree that's more empathy than you could ever have imagined having for another person. But you're like making excuses, whether it's he or she. In my case, it was he, but he just doesn't know what love is. You feel like you're abandoning the person. You feel guilty for even thinking about leaving when they've been through so much, or you've been through so much together. They've put you through this abuse. And every time you overcome these big, explosive or highly emotional arguments, you feel like we've overcome something. And I think it bonds you further. Ultimately, you just feel like you can't leave. You know you need to. Parts of you know that. The logical part of your brain is saying, leave. You need to leave. This is wrong. This is bad. You may even have friends and family telling you to leave, but you may also be hiding what's really going on from your friends and family. I think people protect for two reasons. One, they're protecting the reputation of your partner, but you're also protecting your own reputation, because if you stay, if you don't actually leave, then people are going to look at you like you're insane for staying in a relationship that you yourself have described so poorly. It's just this state of confusion. You don't know what you're doing here. You struggle to sort of reconcile why you're still in the relationship.
What would you consider other traits that someone might be able to recognize and point to if they are currently in one?
It's the absolute confusion where you are feeling like you're on eggshells. You don't know what version of them you're going to get. You know, when you come home or when they come home, you're like, anxiety. Is this going to be good or bad? If I say this, is it going to go south? And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But really, you're looking for this kind of intermittent kindness that's happening. It doesn't stick, and you can't really pin down how to help them be in better moods or what you can do. If you feel like you're always wrong, if you feel like you can just do nothing right, every problem is your fault, or you're no longer trusting your own sense of reality, you start to question your own memories. All of these things together kind of combined just leads you down this path of confusion.
I wanted to add something really important that I think, because we're talking about romantic relationships, it's not exclusive to romantic relationships.
Correct.
Because I had one with my mom, and I remember feeling intense separation anxiety to where it felt like something bad would happen if we're not together. Do you find that as common, that people have multiple trauma bonds?
People can, absolutely. You can have it with parents, siblings, work, bosses, friends. So they can exist in multiple relationships, and you can have more than one.
Yeah, in my experience, I had one with a parent too. I can relate to that. But then I later got it with a partner. How did you know, or how would you talk to someone else about that space of sort of moving out of the trauma bond or breaking the trauma bond? Like, how do we recognize that?
To break out of them, the first step, in my view, is clarity and education. So you need to start understanding, like, what is a trauma bond? Why do people stay? You get into why you stay, because each situation is unique. Yes, it may be a trauma bond, but there's specifics that are just, individuals have different experiences. But you're learning, and what is cognitive dissonance? I think that was something that was absolutely eye-opening to me, was learning what cognitive dissonance really is, the confusion, and that it can be resolved or reduced. You can't see them as two people. They're one person. So doing work and looking for evidence, true evidence in your life that they are the bad version, not the good version, and that the good exists almost exclusively to facilitate the bad. Narcissists are also human beings, and they have good days and bad days like anyone, but ultimately it all serves a purpose. The good fundamentally is manipulative. It's meant to keep you, and they groom you over time to receive less and less of the good so that they don't have to put in as much of an effort. So you start recognizing this. You start to resolve the cognitive dissonance through education and clarity and looking at the science of a trauma bond, really getting it all. learning the abuse terms. I mean, I remember it was like a constant little explosion every new word I learned. It was like, wow, gaslighting. I've never heard that word. That he did it all the time. Exploitative? What's that? Some words we know, but you don't think of them in the context of your relationship. And then some of them more like pop culture words rather than psych words, but like flying monkeys and future faking. And these are tactics that are used, blame shifting, and how it becomes a tactic. We all understand how a person can shift blame, but how someone who is covertly, insidiously shifting blame that actually shifts how you think over time. You're not able to think clearly and completely for yourself anymore because you don't trust yourself. So shaping some of that through the education. My second step is starting to look inwardly. And this is where I really suggest licensed mental health work, learning about your unmet needs. Internal family systems is a therapy that I really benefited from. Learning about what made this feel normal, what made this feel comfortable or acceptable. So really learning about your own childhood and your own responsibility for being here, not responsible for the abuse, for clarity, but responsible for being where you are and not leaving at the first signs. And it's just what made it all feel like it made sense. How did you rationalize it? So you're getting more into your own self and listening to yourself. And then the last step is building a future, but that does not include them. That's the key. Who's in your support system? Do you have the right support system? Do you need to talk to the support system you have about your needs? So I always say first identify what you need, how you need to be supported, see what you have in your life, and you may need to shape things. You may see some gaps, and how can you fill those for yourself? Some people have to figure out where they're going to live. If you're not financially dependent, if you share children, there's so many factors. So my build a future is very customized to people's individual situations, but building that out, because I see fear is a huge reason why people stay. Where will I live? How will I support myself? What will I do? Will I be alone forever? We have 3 kids. Who's going to want me? This overwhelming fear of the unknown. So you can unpack all of these things. That's why I say it's 3 steps, but boy, is it not easy steps. But you can break these and learn how to leave.
So tell me first what gaslighting is, because I've noticed there's some confusion going on about it. Some people now think that gaslighting is when you make me feel uncomfortable, you kind of call me out on my feelings. Other people say, no, it's just lying. What is gaslighting?
So gaslighting is what happens when one person, usually a person with greater power in the relationship, manipulates their partner or the gaslightee such that the gaslightee begins to second guess their own phone number, their character, their memory, their perception. It's a kind of a psychological abuse in manipulating your reality to join mine. Very often, people either happen into the gaslighting because they're caught in, for example, an uncomfortable position. So I say to you, Kerry, I haven't heard from you in days. Like, you haven't called me. Where were you? And you say to me, why are you so paranoid? Because you don't want to tell me where you were, and you know you haven't called me, and you don't want to apologize, and you don't feel badly.
Right.
So in that moment, you might happen into twisting the conversation to blame me rather than taking responsibility. And it worked, because then I walk away and I'm thinking, maybe I am being paranoid. And what's worse is I start trying to prove to you I'm not really paranoid. And so in that case, the gaslighting may be unintentional, as I may not be trying to have you undermine all your judgment, but I am trying to get you to believe that there's something wrong with you.
I've noticed there's a whole range of it, because when I started learning more about gaslighting, I realized that I had gaslit my kids. Like,
Yes.
for example, we're trying to get out of the house. They don't want to get out of the house. They're whining. And I will then comment on the whining instead of addressing their issue. Like, do you have to make it so difficult? Let's get out. We need to get to the car.
Right.
So I was really convicted, really uncomfortable when I realized that I didn't mean to do that. That wasn't very mature of me to do that. But yet, working with people who have suffered abuse of some form or even severe abuse, you can hear horrendous stories of people twisting things, driving their partners crazy even sometimes. Do you think that there are multiple reasons why people gaslight? That there are, like, not only maybe different types of people who gaslight, but also different motivations for gaslighting?
I do think so. I think that the underlying motivation is to be in control of the reality in that moment. But you want to be in control maybe because you don't want to get caught in something. you don't like the way you're feeling, you're uncomfortable, and you've had the experience of knowing that when you can control reality, you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
You want to deflect something. You want to deflect attention away from what happened. You don't like a set of people. Again, you want to control. You want the power in the moment. So you want to control the way somebody thinks about something. And it's not always diabolical. It could just be you don't feel like going to that relative's house.
It really sounds like it's a psychological maneuver to avoid discomfort, but one that's actually very costly to the relationship and costly to the person who's experiencing it, which I don't think at the time we realized that we're offloading, that we're harming things when we do this. It's really a preservation of self is what I hear you describing.
Exactly. Either to confirm some belief you have or to protect your ego from being wrong or to just protect what you want to do in that moment. So it's always a bid for power and control. And the other thing that's important is that the gaslighter is as eager to keep the connection together, to keep that sense of we're joined as the gaslightee is. So one of the things that gaslightees, that people who are gaslighted really can't tolerate is the idea that they could pull away and just say, whatever, you have your own thoughts. But they won't necessarily get their partner's approval.
You blew my mind with that statement because I had never picked up on that piece before. But the minute you said it, it made sense because we typically accuse narcissists and other toxic people of being so self-absorbed that they're not so concerned about the relationship. But actually, that's not true, is it?
It's not true in that dynamic for sure, because the gaslighter has made you part of his reality. So the narcissist, the narcissist gaslighter is very interested in keeping his kingdom together, his bubble together, and you're part of him. You're joining his reality, right?
Right.
And we, as women particularly, and this is something that I think is so important, we are taught to be accommodating. We're taught to be empathic and think about the other person and how they may be feeling. And we get so lost often in standing in other people's shoes that we forget we're even wearing shoes of our own. And so we are taught to accommodate. And when we accommodate quite a bit as children, we call that pathological accommodation. Like if we have a gaslighter parent and we're constantly giving up pieces of ourselves to join them. But it's no less pathological accommodation when we are grown up and we find ourselves giving over pieces of reality, giving over our feelings, giving over our voice. In the stages of gaslighting, the last stage where people are often, as you described, like depressed and feel like your soul has been destroyed, and there's no reason to be complaining anymore because you've joined in thinking there's something wrong with you. And the something wrong with you is not that you have a difference of opinion.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? Find me at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. Now you don't need to wait a week to get your next podcast fix. Join Breaking Free from Narc Abuse at Substack.com to get exclusive audio content for subscribers. To sign up, click the link in the show notes. And whether you're in, consider leaving, or have left a narcissistic relationship, find community support at my Toxic Free Relationship Club. You can learn about this resource as well as others at KerryMcAvoyPhD.com. And I'll see you back here next week.